Hi, everyone. Welcome to Community Roots, a place where we gather in community to talk about mental health so we can travel the journey of life together. I'm Samuel Richards.
I'm Julie Richards.
I'm Sarah Wakefield.
And we're back in person.
Yay!
We did it. Man, this is like 7 months.
It feels like forever.
Oh, my goodness.
As soon as we got this recording studio set up, how many times have we even recorded in here? Like
4?
3, 2.
Yeah, hardly any. Like I think we did it, but we had coronavirus.
Crazy. Yeah.
Quarantine.
So good to see your face.
Well, we're back. The window is open.
We're
it's
being socially
as far apart as we can with this setup.
But we did hand washing and temperature checking and wearing a mask on the way in and out.
Yeah, so don't worry about your hosts. We're fine. We're doing well. We're taking the necessary precautions. But it is really great to be back in person. I feel like there's an energy on Zoom that just isn't really captured. So, as well as the connection issues.
Especially with the internet connections where everything just breaks up and...
There's just like a dog barking at certain points. But hey, we're through it.
Wasn't my dog.
Random challenges. Which, shout out to everybody who's trying to do school online and business meetings online and therapy online. The poor internet of the world is overtapped. And it's just a challenge.
It is such a challenge.
It's the exhaustion on your brain and looking at the screen all day. And that's hard for everybody.
You know, we talked about allostatic load early in the season, but it really is. I noticed it yesterday that is, even acknowledging it hasn't made it go away. And I kind of thought if I acknowledged the allostatic load,
you wanted to fix it.
Yeah.
You wanted to be like, okay, enough of that.
Okay,
I've already said it's real.
I understand the concept. It's this ever-present stress level that doesn't go away. But clearly by identifying it, it'll be gone. And no, it's and for
there.
the parents and students out there who are working under these insane conditions, you know, keep going. You can do the hard things, but we're with you in spirit.
Yeah, trying to juggle the job full-time plus kids online in the same house with the same internet with all the schedules that conflict. That is some hard stuff.
Yeah, I actually think this is the longest I haven't been staring at a screen since coronavirus started. I'm just kidding.
I know. I kind of want to pick up my phone now.
Yeah, right.
Anything happen?
Yeah, we'll have a phone break every 10 minutes in this episode for everyone to just get their itch scratched.
We're all becoming dependent on.
There you go. That's a great segue.
Oh.
Mom did it.
Oh,
look at that.
So this week,
organic.
Yeah, this week we're actually going to talk about codependency and kind of what it is. You know, it's a buzzword. We've talked about that. It's a buzzword that a lot of people will talk about codependency, but it's hard to actually figure out what it is. So we'll go over that. And then we'll also talk about some healthy habits that we can do in order to kind of mitigate that codependency that we might be feeling in our day to day.
Sounds good. So I like looking through the lens of Pia Melody, which we've mentioned many, many times on our podcast. Pia Melody talks about codependency as emotional immaturity. So basically, we don't really have a strong sense of self, of who we are, and we're not able to really differentiate or delineate who I am from who you are. And so it gets all tangled up. And so I start to feel the energy of everyone else's feelings. I don't have the boundaries to take care of myself first. I'm more concerned about taking care of everybody else. I'm more concerned about what they think. All my energy is going out.
Julie, would you say that you talk a lot about the different states of being, like the adolescent, I'm blanking on all of them right now.
It's like we haven't been together in so long. You're getting rusty.
I want to say adaptive, but I don't think that's right. But
functional adult,
yes.
Wounded child, adapted adolescent.
Would you say codependency is prevalent under the other two, the younger two versus the older two, or the older one, the adult?
So the functional adult would have emotional maturity.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the emotional immaturity could come in the form of the wounded child or the adapted adolescent. But I think, like, based on what we were also talking earlier about the idea of a continuum for a healthy connection that is also in Pia's model. And she talks about on one side, it's more disengaged, which technically, like if we think of boundaries, our boundary episode, that adapted adolescent is walled off. Like they're very protected. They don't want to connect.
So they're disengaged.
So they're more disengaged. I mean, officially, according to that boundary spectrum. And then with no boundaries, it would be more enmeshed, which would be the wounded child.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, I will post something on the show notes that will actually go over. It's a graph called Healthy Connection, and there's kind of spectrum from unhealthy to healthier to unhealthy again. So I guess it's one of those horseshoes. And on one end, you have disengaged. On the other end, you have enmeshed. And so I would like to kind of take a step again and kind of re-go over this idea of codependency, because I do think that there are a lot of different people. Everybody's like, oh, don't be codependent, or we're using those essentially buzzwords to describe another buzzword, codependency. And so maybe to clarify, we've talked about before, codependency is kind of on that enmeshed side where the boundaries are fuzzy. Like Mom said, it's hard to differentiate between what is me and what is you, and what's my identity and what's your identity.
And my energy is all going into really taking care of somebody else. So the whole idea of the oxygen mask on yourself first is not, for someone who's codependent, is I'm making sure everybody else is okay. I'm really worked up about what they think and what they feel and how this affects me. And I think what's underneath that is an insecure sense of self, or I'm going to feel valuable. If I take care of everybody else, I'll be needed, I'll be wanted. And so there's a sense of, I don't have value and worth just for being me. I don't know who I am in my own sense of self. I'm more so connected up with somebody else.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple. I think often I think of these things through like a lens of my partner, right? But instead taking this to apply to any relationship, and maybe some real world applications are both, like we mentioned this in a prior conversation, like somebody who gets lost in the relationship, somebody who their whole identity becomes the other person's likes and dislikes. And that might feel like in the moment you're just trying to be say interesting things for that person, or you're right, do exactly what they want to do so that you fulfill their needs.
Or a people pleaser.
Yeah, a people pleaser.
Under that category.
Yeah. Another thing I would say too is like maybe parental codependency, being like, well, I'm looking at my career options and I know what my parents want me to do, and I know kind of like that isn't really what I want to do, so maybe I should do it anyway though, that kind of obligation to please other people at the expense of your own. Is that pretty much what codependency is? I
think that has some good connections to it. Some of it is also like, instead of just having, I think sometimes the intent can be good. I want to help someone. I want to care for somebody. But if we take it too far where all of our energy is in kind of obsessing about other people and what are their emotions and what are their problems and how do I give advice?
So like, how can I feel my feelings without checking in with the other person? So when I think of codependency, I think of caregivers, and I think of, well, I can't feel happy if that person's feeling sad, or I can't feel my own feelings unless I've taken care of that person and they're feeling good. So if they're feeling good, then I'll feel good. If they're angry, then I'll feel anything but what I actually want to feel. Is that?
Yeah, that kind of brought up that phrase in my mind of, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. Yeah. Or like, just like everything is, we can't have our own experience, our own thoughts, our own feelings. They have to be dependent on the other person.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick time out. I'm just going to write down the time, 28:41. You can write whatever you want.
I also bumped my...
So, Julie, something else I was thinking of that Samuel had mentioned with regards to parental relationships is also the reverse of a parent living, a lot of times you'll hear, vicariously through their children, or deriving their self-worth from their child's engagement with them, and only feeling valued if this child returns the love that this parent is giving. And if the parent doesn't see that love being returned, then they become resentful, they become angry and upset. Is that another form of codependency?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've talked about it kind of as an abusive relationship because it's a role reversal, that my needs are getting met through my child.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's my self-esteem, that I feel more valuable as a person because they are a reflection of me, that's entangled and enmeshed and not healthy.
I also like that we've taken some time to explain it because I think it makes it more clear. A codependent relationship where both people are codependent on each other, and how the arrow still is going one way instead of being like that double-sided arrow that you're both giving each other what you need. Like it's just one person is always just thinking about the other person. The other person's just constantly thinking about the other person. And that probably involves like complete enmeshment. If you refer to the graph again, like just kind of never spend any time with anybody else, like constantly worried about somebody else's window of tolerance, I guess, or all sorts of things. Because for a while, for me, at least personally, codependent relationships were hard for me to grasp,
Mm-hmm.
Like if both people are getting what they, but I guess they're not getting what they want. They don't have autonomy.
I think that's the key point, is that there's no secure sense of self. It's like an insecure, I'm only okay if you're okay, is kind of what you were saying earlier, Sarah. Like I can only be happy if they're happy because I'm too nervous of what's happening between us if that's not secure.
In the book, Codependent No More,
Melody Beatty.
Thank you. Melody Beatty, she talks a lot about codependence with regards to addiction, and even being concerned that if you're the caretaker of somebody who has an addiction, if that person gets healed, or not gets healed, but goes through the healing process and goes through recovery. Thank you. Then that person's going to lose some of their identity as this caregiver, their hold on this person, and through that person, that addiction becomes important to them.
Yeah, like a caretaker, that they are just trying to meet the needs to be important, to be valued, to be wanted, to be needed.
Okay, what about temporary codependency? Like somebody is sick, so then you're their literal caretaker. Like, wouldn't there be a brief period of codependency? I think that's a caregiver.
Like I'm giving care is appropriate.
I don't think of nurses. I mean,
like caretaker would be more of like, I am taking something, it's meeting my need. I'm not giving care for the purpose of helping support you. As a functional adult someone is needing support is valuable, important. That's like a good, healthy thing. If they genuinely need help, it's okay to ask for support. That makes us interdependent.
Yeah. Okay. So what, let's say, for example, because I think it's important to hash out, not necessarily a specific example, but anyway, essentially you're out hanging out with your friends and your child texts you like, hey, I'm like homesick and I'm not feeling super well. Can you bring soup, and come home and comfort me? And so then you're kind of at an impasse. Like, what do I want to do? Like, what would I do? Or what would be best for the other person? And I mean, my go-to was I want to help the other person, but is that codependency at that point? And is that healthy codependency? Because it's brief, like, hey, I've been throwing up all day. I really need some help. Like that's a brief codependency as opposed to.
I don't like connecting it with being a healthy codependency. I don't think that that's possible. Yeah. It's more of I am giving you support because you need it. And that's healthy.
Maybe there's a different scenario for a child parent. Maybe the child is doing something that's not a need, an immediate need, a health need, because I think health needs are different in this scenario, or in this codependency. I think taking care of someone who is bleeding, sick,
Yeah, I guess that my situation could have fallen under that.
No, but I understand we're trying to flesh out what is exactly codependency in the real world. Yeah. So we have the theory behind it. We have the application of these healthy connection roles that Sam's going to post. But what does it actually look like? Maybe it's a child who can't, like, you need to raise a child who can become a functional adult. And so they need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and operate without you. So maybe helicopter parents are good. Like, that's a codependent relationship from the parent to the child.
I was thinking like maybe a child who is having difficulty with homework or something, and you just start doing it for them.
Yeah, I think that would be a great
like,
codependent.
There's something where
I mean,
what a great codependent
example, people. Just an example.
Good example.
it's I do think that's interesting. I do agree with that mindset, and I don't know if it's mental health therapist approved, but that idea of like immediate needs, like need to survive, are different than other needs. Because like, I mean, I immediately thought of like an equivalent situation, like somebody's having a heart attack on the floor and you have like food in front of you. Are you going to eat the food and then help them out, or are you just going to help them out? So yeah, I think it's an equivalent situation, but I see what you guys are saying.
It depends on the food.
There you go.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think the idea of we have all different kinds of needs. I mean, we've got the physical or safety needs. We also have attachment needs to be seen and heard and understood and welcomed, and that kind of relational attachment, things that are really important. I don't think you just disregard those to say like, oh, I have to focus on myself first.
Like when we visited orphanages, you know, or children especially need those attachments to grow up to be functional adults. They need that care, and it's not a matter of, okay, you're a baby, like take care of yourself while I go meet my needs. I mean, you have to give. That is not a codependent relationship, an unhealthy one. It sounds like it might actually be a healthy.
Right. There are definitely legitimate needs that we need to meet. The issue becomes for that person who is in the middle of it. If they are only taking care of everybody else and all their energy is going out, and they don't know who they are, and they don't know what they think or feel. They don't know. We talked in a recent episode about, Samuel, when you and I were just on that episode by ourselves, about do I have the stamina right now for me to be able to help somebody or not? Like, we're all going through a pandemic. There's different levels of what that chaos looks like for each family. There are times that you have to go, I have to put the oxygen mask on me because I'm going under if I don't. And so I think those needs for taking care of children, whether it's in that orphanage setting or in our families or wherever, yes, of course, they have legitimate needs, attachment needs, connection needs. However, we can't fully meet them well if we're depleted ourselves.
Yeah, I do think that
we have to factor we have to factor ourselves in, is another way to say it, of like, okay, I have to make sure that my self-care is really solid, that I'm getting sleep and nutrients and some social engagement with people that can be life-giving to me too. Because if all I'm doing is pouring out, we've kind of talked before, I think, about the idea of you can't give from an empty cup. You have nothing left to give. So that doing it that way is a form of codependency, because I have nothing left. So I must be gaining where that serves me is that I feel like I'm such a good mom or friend, or because I'm giving so much, I'm feeling valuable because I am needed and serving and giving, and so I'm getting something back from that. It's that altruistic, oh, I'm such a great person, or oh, I'm such a great teacher or parent or whatever. So that becomes a codependent thing.
It's like, look how empty my cup is, and look at what I can do because my cup is so empty, and I'm doing all of these things. There's a self-worth there's a value that you obtain from operating with your cup so empty, a pride almost.
Like a status symbol of,
yeah,
I give so much.
Yeah. That would be a sign of a codependent relationship. If that's where your self-worth is coming from, is saying like, look at me. Like I slave all day. I wore myself out. Yeah, exactly. I kept thinking martyr, but I didn't want to go that route. But I wonder if that's a way to just get an idea of whether or not you're in a codependent relationship.
I love how this builds on everything that we've talked about for a while. Codependency, or just this idea of dealing with healthy relationships, is a accumulation of our talk about boundaries. Like, obviously this brings up boundaries, but also the window of tolerance, like being within your own window, or self-care. Like, there's so much that fits into this. Assessing yourself, like really having some body connection so that you can feel what you're feeling and what your needs are. Yeah, I love the graphs that you made, Mom. I wonder if we can post those, because I think it so clearly defines that this graph, I mean, what this columned graph doesn't really represent well is the importance of boundaries, and how in your one picture, there is no sense of boundary. And the other one, like, everybody is a distinct individual. So, yeah, I think that's definitely important. And
so the two pictures that Samuel's talking about, just to give some clarity, since you all aren't in our same room with us, these came about in kind of an organic way when I was doing a workshop with some people and trying to explain the concept of codependency. And if you're in the middle of a tangled up, there's no clear boundaries, my energy's all going out, what that ends up creating for you is a lot of exhaustion and feeling tangled up, losing energy, feeling enmeshed. You might have different thoughts of, like, why is my life not okay? Why isn't this working? I can't do this. I can't keep this up. Being angry or irritable or caretaking, having guilt and pressure, like I have to keep doing this. It's crazy making, because I don't know where I am in the midst of that. I'm kind of lost. All I'm doing is pouring out and nothing is coming back in. So I don't have a strong foundation. And compare that to the second picture that I made that's with a secure sense of self, where it's much more clear where I am and who I am. I know myself. I know what my reality is. I have my thoughts, my feelings, my fears, my hopes, my dreams, my needs and wants and preferences. I know who I am. And even though we can be on that journey where we're figuring that out, you know, it's not that you have it all figured out, but you stay in touch with yourself. You have a way to kind of come back home to yourself of having some differentiation between you and somebody else, that you're still able to have a connection and mutuality and interdependence. So we have arrows that kind of go both ways. There's something coming in to connect me and refuel me, and so that I can be my best self. And then I'm also mutually giving out. So it's balanced. It's interesting when you look at these two pictures too, because first of all, it's not that we just have it all mastered and that we stay in one or the other, but it's more like how the day is going. And this is very similar to our window of tolerance, because when we're in that green zone, ventral vagal, social engagement, we feel more like we have a secure sense of self, and we are in a good place. We feel regulated. We feel good. But whenever we get outside our window of tolerance, we're more likely to get our boundaries all tangled up with each other and be exhausted and overwhelmed and frustrated. And so we can go back and forth throughout the day, even, I think. And it's interesting to sit with the two pictures and to notice what's happening in your nervous system as you look at one or the other. Like, if you're looking at this tangled up codependency, you feel some tension in your body, like, oh, like that's going to choke me out, or it's going to frustrate me or exhaust me. But if you look at the secure sense of self that has some delineation and boundaries, and it's clearer, it's calmer, it's peaceful, it gives your nervous system a sense of relief.
Just looking at these two, when you show the picture, the one diagram of the chaos, my heart rate,
anxiety.
I get like tense and like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. And then you show me the other one of a secure sense of self. I'm like, oh.
Right.
You can exhale, you can breathe.
Yep. So
yeah, and it is all about it is all about our nervous systems and how our nervous systems communicate with each other. And that is important because we're trying to figure out how to listen to our body, and our feelings are messengers, and we're able to connect and see what our needs are and be able to meet those needs.
Actually, what that probably feels like is what you guys mentioned earlier. I forget the term, but like the constant connection to your phone, that it actually exhausts you more.
Mm-hmm.
What's that called?
The allostatic load.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a stress. That's a stress level, right?
Oh,
Isn't that a constant stress?
well,
Get
I
it
know,
right, Sam.
I know that
I've been
we
paying
feel it
attention.
whenever we have our phone on us, because those
Yes.
notifications.
Yes, no, you're
those,
right. You're right. We did talk about that in the same episode. So if you go back to one of our first episodes about coronavirus and the allostatic load, it was one,
Mhm.
2 or 3 into, maybe 1 or 2 into it. But we did talk about that constant curiosity, like being aware of like the ping. Like,
Yeah.
can I get the ping?
You're hyper aware of your phone.
Mhm.
And I think that I feel a similar thing with codependent situations, like where
Mhm.
you're actually thinking about something else. You're actually like hyper aware of what somebody else is feeling or thinking. And that's just what came to mind. Another thing that came to mind is whenever you're talking about buzzwords, I was thinking of another buzzword that might work, because I think it might be in terms of black and white, but maybe roles. And you can confirm or deny this, but I just kind of had this thought: if somebody kind of says like, oh, well, I'm their parent, or like, well, I'm their like son, or I'm their partner, you know, like, and it kind of obligates you to do the next thing, you know, because you're so focused on your role rather than your individuality.
Is that like when we introduce ourselves and we give, you know, where do you work? Like you say your name and then you're like, oh, well, what do you do?
Yeah,
And your
like,
identity's tied up in that. Is that kind of where you're going with
yeah, yeah. Or to say like, introduce somebody that like, this is my girlfriend. And so the role is then like the girlfriend, you know?
And then you behave as the girl, like,
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, I must be the girlfriend, which has this caretaker
Yeah,
giver
yeah.
association or
Who's
something.
reliant on somebody else. Like
Yeah.
there's a person who has a girlfriend,
Yeah.
you know, and so then you're reliant. And I don't know if I'm just like over analyzing these terms, but
No,
I
I
could
like
see
it.
I could see like the roles inserting like a black and white mindset of like, if you view, let's just stick with that partnership role, as like, well, you know, as a girlfriend, you know, I need to be supportive and present.
Mm-hmm.
But and it doesn't really take your emotions and feelings into account. You're just thinking about your role. Like, I need to be present and here, instead of, does that make sense?
It does tie in, I think, why I like the word partner. And I know
Mhm.
you use that when you discuss your relationship with your significant other. It is a partnership.
Right.
And I do think that gives that person autonomy. So maybe if you can't describe your significant other without using, or by using the word partner, maybe you are in a codependent relationship.
There you go. Yeah.
Just kidding, you're not.
I do love the word partner for that reason, because it's like, we're partners, you know, it's not a hierarchical thing.
Mm-mm.
But, and I also think of the Wild West, so it works both ways. Like,
Do you say partner?
we're partners. But I was just thinking about different like buzzwords that could kind of put us in that place. You know, I'm going through dialectical behavioral therapy right now, so that is where my mind is going in terms of black and white. The word should being like a trigger word, I can also see being used in terms of like a codependent relationship. Like, I should be there, or I should be helping them out, you know, like putting yourself into kind of this, well, you have to do it or you don't have to do it.
My therapist once said, sorry, Julie, just really fast. You shouldn't all over yourself.
Don't should on yourself is what we say.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, so more of a codependent kind of helping is going to feel like an obligation,
Right.
or being a compulsively, I need to do this, instead of feeling like I have a choice in this that I can factor myself in, which I think is an important distinction.
I also, maybe going over this last question that I like, that I've been using recently in order to boundary myself, which is, what does my body want, or what does my body need right now? And if I'm feeling pulled in a ton of different directions, then I can't take something else on, you know? And so being able to ask myself that question before I'm like, yeah, sure, I can help with that, or I can do that. Just taking a second pause and being like, well, what is my body asking for right now?
Mm-hmm. I think that's important, because it's kind of like your sense of home, or knowing yourself, of coming back to that groundedness of my secure sense of self.
And like you said before, I can't really help someone if I myself am drowning.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't breathe, how can I put the oxygen mask on you?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
It's definitely something I've learned in my relationships through therapy and the new relationships I've formed. It's I'm not trying to be mean to the other person or to say, no, you're not important to me, but I have to take care of myself. I have to put that oxygen mask on. And if I don't, the results are way worse. What I'm finding with my own relationships is if I don't take the time to take care of myself, it ends up far worse later on. So if somebody wants to spend their time with me and I want to spend time with them, but maybe I've booked myself too much for that day, I will be so cranky the next day. I will be irritated. I will be far worse off than if I had said, you know what? I care about you deeply, but I need to take this time. Like, I need to take this time for myself and I need to recharge. And it's not because I don't love you or don't care about you. It's, I will be a better partner to you if I get to take this time for myself. Or Sam, you were talking about, checking in with your body. And a lot of times, I want to say yes. I love being a helper. If I can give you like whatever you need, then I will do it because I've gained some self-worth out of, that's not healthy, but I've gained some idea of self-worth.
I'm glad you clarified. Otherwise people will be like, oh yeah, I should do that.
Yeah,
I should do that just like Sarah does.
No, don't do what I do. But I do check in with my body. I have learned, check in with yourself. Can I take this on? Can I say yes to this? And does it come from a healthy standpoint? Like, do I maintain that same sense of functional adult? Or am I slipping into, well, I'm going to do this so that they feel like, so that I feel like they like me or so that they show that they like me? Because I could really use that affirmation from them, even though
or because I can't even tolerate that they would be upset.
Yes.
Like that would be a boundary issue. If what I do isn't enough, I have to do more because they'll be upset. Then I'm taking care of their feelings so that they don't interrupt my feelings.
Yes. I think that's a big component of codependency.
Because we're out of touch with ourselves of, okay, they're allowed to have their feelings. They're allowed to be upset. They're allowed to be disappointed or hurt, not because you're intentionally trying to hurt somebody, but because they have their own reaction to it of how it's impacting them. I can still do my best to be kind or respectful or, I always like the word honor and Samuel doesn't like that word. So we kind of pick our terminology for it, but like I can have the best in mind for somebody else and still factor myself in and to be able to say, I have to be true to myself. And really, when we look at that picture of that codependency side and it's so exhausted, how can I give? Even if my intention is so good that I want to love or I want to be very giving, that might come from a good place on one level. But if I can't sustain it because I'm so depleted, it's going to come out as exhaustion, guilt, pressure, irritability, frustration, because then it could also turn into resentment. Like, did they appreciate it enough? Are they glad that I did that? Or do they need me? I mean, it gets very tangled up. So I thought it would be good for us to talk a little bit about, like, as we're kind of maybe segueing into a different part of this, is like, how do we be more mature emotionally? How do we be more functional adult? What are some things that we can focus on instead of just what not to do, but what would it look like to be healthy in this?
Say no to everything and everyone all the time.
Yeah, I say you flip it in the opposite direction.
That seems really
You're going
healthy.
too fast, reverse the car.
Wow.
You've taught us well, Julie.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
And we've listened to every episode.
Oh dear.
No, for sure. We have been kind of teasering. Now, how do you kind of get in that place? And I do think, one, listening to Community Roots, going back at our old episodes. But seriously, it really does bring up that idea of window of tolerance, boundaries, being able to hold up one hand over your heart and the other hand extended. Taking a deep breath, I think, is almost key to my recentering. That the first thing I have to do is kind of like clear my head and just make a decision then, as opposed to, I'm in the moment, pick, can you help me or not? Can we do this real quick? And it's just, I need a breath. I need to check in with myself first.
Is it too much to ask yourself or question your motives? Ask yourself, well, why am I
What's
doing
driving this?
Yeah. Is there opportunity to do that?
I think it's a fair question. Like, what is motivating me to do this? What's underneath this?
Mm.
Another piece of this that, you're listing out a lot of good things from previous episodes. Self-care is essential. We don't have to go into a big explanation of that in this episode right now. I know that people in general, when I sit with them and talk about self-care, there's almost this look of like disappointment or frustration. Like, really? That's the answer? That doesn't help. I can't do it. I'm not sure it's going to get me anywhere. And I'll even say sometimes like it feels like you're drowning and you have a spoon in your boat that you're trying to take out the water so you don't go under. It's like, how does that even seem like it'll work? But whenever people come back to me and they're in a better place and they're feeling better, I can pretty much guarantee you if I talk to them, they've changed their relationship with themselves.
Mm.
They're taking better care of themselves. They have more self-respect, more self-love, and they're able to see all the different ways that they're doing the self-care, the very things that they thought like were frustrating or why do I have to do this or they resented it. It's like they've shifted that relationship to prioritize themselves. You will feel better when you're taking good care of yourself. You will see a difference. It takes some time, a little bit at times.
It does feel incremental when you take those first steps of identifying self-care opportunities. I think
I'm someone that I feel it pretty close. Like I feel it in the day to day. Just the other day I had a bad day and I was like, why was today so hard? And I thought back and it wasn't really any instance. Like I didn't have any deadlines. There was nothing really stressful. And I was like, well, I didn't eat until noon. And then the next time I ate after that, it was like a cheese stick at like 3 p.m. Like, so I just wasn't getting any nutrition and my body was on starvation mode. And the next day I kind of restarted. I mean, that night I was like, well, I'm still going to eat healthy, but I don't want to like just overload and then just go to sleep grumpy. But the next day I kind of rethought over some of the things that were really annoying me and really getting under my skin. And I'm just like, hey, things happen, and it's just a night and day difference between getting food at the right time and not getting food at the right time for me was a switch. So I definitely do think that it can help in really big ways, like pulling an all-nighter and then taking a test the next day as opposed to having the correct amount of sleep. Like it might seem incremental I guess it could also be incremental as well, especially if you've been pulling 5 or 6 all-nighters and then you just get sleep that last night. But just how important and immediate I think self-care is, and not shopping, because I know we're talking about self-care a bunch now anyway, but
and self-care isn't, let's go to this. I mean, self-care can be treat yourself on a very like brief level or
in one way.
But it's not about let's go to the spa, let's buy all the things, because you'll feel worse after you buy all of the things and you look at your bank account and then or if you move and you have to move all those things you've bought. My point is self-care isn't what you think of almost immediately sometimes in a society that perpetuates self-care being treating yourself. It's identifying mindsets that are unhealthy. It's taking the first step and saying and establishing a boundary. It's getting enough sleep so that you can make those decisions. It's filling yourself with nutrition so that you're not grumpy and irritated at every little thing, and you can identify and become more attuned with your inner child, your inner person, yourself, your functional adult, so that you can make decisions that are based out of love, but based out of a strong sense of self-awareness. Am I tracking right on this?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Thank you.
And then to be able to check in with yourself often, like not only doing that, but also checking in. I felt lucky that I checked in with myself the other day because I was ready to yell at my partner. I'm like, well, it's not their fault. Like I'm just kind of grumpy and hungry, and they accidentally knocked like my drink, It was a complete accident that I was ready to go to 10 and I was like, okay, check in with yourself a little bit. You haven't eaten today.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Seriously. So I think that checking in with yourself is important too, because life is super busy and it catches up real quick. And one day can go one way and another day can go the next. So,
and it's not a cure-all. Like you don't emerge from a codependent relationship and then all of a sudden you're healed, or you don't heal yourself of codependency. It's this constant checking in with yourself. I mean, you take great steps to become aware of codependent relationships and how to be who you are, and that self-awareness. But it does take constant reminders, constant check-ins. I mean, here's Samuel.
Or like a muscle, like just
yeah, exactly.
Developing that muscle
Yeah.
is always a good analogy, I think. And I think what's coming to mind for me as we're talking about this for just a moment is to say that even whenever you feel so depleted and you feel like I can't do anything, when people are really feeling very heavy and low, say with depression or completely overwhelmed in a panic and anxiety, it's the small things. If you can find some sense of agency to do just a little bit, that becomes very powerful, because it's the mindset that's like when we're in kind of a negative spiral of, I can't do it, it's too much, it's not going to help, that we'll continue to spiral down. But if we, attempt to make one small step, one small moment, and then build on those from there, it will help. But circling back around, if we can, I wanted to mention the work of Sharon Martin. She has a website called livewellwithsharonmartin.com. And I've reached out to her, and she's potentially going to be on an episode with us coming up in the future, which I think would be great. But she has so many great resources, handouts. She actually has an entire kit on healing from codependency, which is awesome. It was like $9, very affordable, for all kinds of different reminders, helpful tidbits, and journal exercises and affirmations and all kinds of things. So it helps bring some clarity. Sometimes whenever you can kind of see, what does codependency look like? What is true helping? And what does that look like? And you can kind of compare and see, where am I lining up with this? What do I find myself doing? Am I more one? Am I more the other? And where do I need to like make some adjustments where I might be sliding too far into something that's codependent? So just for some examples, like if we're able to consider other people's needs and your own needs and your own limitations, and that's balanced, you're in a good place with that. If you have boundaries and you can be flexible and respectful, and you've got a healthy distinction of yourself and others, those are all going to be healthier relationships and not codependency. There's also the idea of what kind of self-talk, like how do we talk to ourselves? Do we have things that we're kind of drowning in with feeling like everything's my fault, I'm worthless, I shouldn't be having needs, I shouldn't spend time or money on myself, it's not that important, I can wait, I really don't need it. Like, are we dismissive of ourselves, or could it look healthier and be more of a functional adult if we take responsibility for what our thoughts and feelings and actions are, and we let someone else take responsibility for theirs? We're not saying that they're incapable, so we have to do it for them. We're able to show that somebody else has strengths as well that they can use. It's knowing that doing things for myself is a healthy thing. That's not selfish, that my needs matter. And I can tolerate difficult feelings. So if you're upset, you're allowed to be upset. It's okay that you're upset or you're frustrated or disappointed. I don't have to fix that. I don't have to jump in right away and do something to rescue you out of that. It's okay if we just sit with hard feelings, and that we can be okay.
I just wanted to say in that instance, something that I try to do after a difficult moment, or a moment that I've had to kind of set a boundary, or had to practice self-care in a time that I wasn't really doing it, even though it seems simple. I affirm myself normally afterwards. I'm like, good job. You were really listening to your body on that one, And I think it's helped improve my own consciousness of my own body. Just affirming myself and saying, hey, you're really taking the steps to listen to yourself and taking healthy mental health steps.
What a kindness to yourself. instead of beating yourself up, instead of saying, oh, well, I did this wrong, or I didn't fix this, or I didn't master this, or whatever. You are lifting yourself up. You're pouring into yourself, filling that cup.
Yeah, and something that I actually did too. It wasn't rainbows. It was like, I heard myself, I listened to myself, and I reacted. So I do think that's a lot healthier than sometimes I'm like, oh, I should have already have done this, or like, why didn't I already just eat? Like, it was so simple, but instead just not getting frustrated, because I do think self-talk is so important.
And listen to the ways that we talk to ourselves to say, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
How could I adjust some of that so that it's not so harsh, not putting so much pressure or judgment or criticism on ourselves, and to have loving kindness for ourselves. That will come out in our relationship with others too, that we feel more solid and in a good place. We're going to give that back out to others. I think of yoga with Adrienne, and she talks about lots of love in and lots of love out.
That's exactly it.
We need to have Adrienne on the show. I swear, I know
wonder
like
if she
40
would.
people who watch yoga with Adrienne. I'm like, geez.
Well,
Maybe
she
we
has
could
like 8 million followers
She
or
does.
something.
I was kind of wondering if it was a Pia Melody thing again, where I'm like, yeah, they're like worldwide famous.
No, I think she's global. I'm pretty sure Adrienne is global.
Yeah, she's worldwide.
She's so cool.
Yeah, that dog is probably more famous than I am, really.
All Benji rocks. Yes.
Cool. Yeah. What are some other viewpoints?
Well, she has some positive affirmations that help heal codependency, and it's coming from a place of, I am enough. It's okay to say no. I don't have to fix everyone else's problems. And sometimes, affirmations can get a bad rap from people sometimes because they're like, oh, it feels so disingenuous. Like, I don't relate to that. And I do think that the key to a positive affirmation, which we've started to add to the end of our shows, the key to it is what resonates with you. Because if you try to stick a positive affirmation on that feels like a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, or it's not relevant, or it doesn't sing to you, I think semantics really are important, and meaning is really important. Like, we're all so unique in what feels really resonating for us. It's like if it sings to you and it really, like, you can feel that in your nervous system of like, oh man, that was so true. But then there's other things that you're like, yeah, not so much. It doesn't hit me in the same way.
Somebody spray painted on our sidewalk, you can do hard things. And, that would definitely hit me multiple different ways, depending on how I feel that day. And it's nice to not have to think, oh, well, it's a positive affirmation. I need to carry that along with me, even though I'm feeling not in the mood to hear that. And it's not giving me anything. But there was a day when I was walking past and I'm like, oh, you know what? I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And it was great for that moment. But I didn't try to attribute it to anything else or any other time.
Yeah, you kind of had to see how it was resonating with you or not.
There are a couple of affirmations that I've said before that I'm like, whatever, it's just going through the motions. And then now I'm like, I really do feel that, I feel like, and I don't know if that's cognitive behavioral therapy right there in action, but very interesting. I think maybe making a more clarifying statement might be helpful as well. Like, I think creating such a blanket statement of like, maybe an affirmation you would say is like, I'm really good at piano, or something like that. You're trying to figure out something that you want to affirm yourself on. So you're like, you know what? I'm really good at piano. And that might feel disingenuous sometimes if you're like, well, yeah, you compare me to Mozart or something, or I don't know how advanced Mozart really is, but
He's dead.
Yeah. Maybe making a more clarifying statement of just like I'm really good at piano when I practice, or I'm really good at this song, I'm really good whenever I get in the groove. Like, making a more clarifying statement, making it more specific might be a good way to feel more, instead of me saying something like, I'm good at self-care, being able to say a more simple affirmation of like, I was able to recognize whenever I need self-care. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You've just given me my affirmation for when we sign off.
Nice. I don't have to do it all myself. I can ask for help. I think that's good for those that are kind of more if we've been really injured, we don't feel like we can rely on other people. And so we're afraid they won't follow through or they won't care or they won't show up. So we tend to get more walled off instead of having connection and mutuality. We think I have to do it. Forget it. I have to do it myself. But like, what if I don't have to do it all myself? What would it look like if I could ask for help?
What if you had a support network?
Yeah, maybe I don't have to push myself so hard and I can be in connection with others in a good, healthy way. Imagine what that could look like.
Imagine.
And then practice it. Yeah. So as we're kind of wrapping up this episode, I think that we've covered a lot of good stuff about codependency. And I'm going to post all of the different graphs that we've talked about online so that you can see what we're talking about. I think they're really useful. And, I'm kind of in the mindset that whenever we talk about these things or whenever I talk about things with my therapist, like sometimes you just hear it and then it takes a couple weeks to practice it. Small little steps of just taking those little. And so I feel like I learned some things today that I'm going to definitely practice, like maybe checking in with my boundaries or maybe checking in with my body a little bit more. But yeah, does anybody else have any concluding thoughts, or are we good to go on to affirmations/gratitudes?
There you go.
Let's do it.
We need like a copyrighted gratitude/affirmations that really flows off the tongue.
Oh,
That's what we're going to spend the last 5 minutes of the episode on.
let's do this.
I'm just kidding.
We shouldn't copyright it. Other people should be able to use it too.
Maybe I just want it zingier.
Oh, you just want it to be attributed to yourself so people are like, oh, Sam Richard said that.
No, I think I want something catchy that I can wear on a t-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Affirm yourself.
Okay, that is good.
It is a start. But anyway, yeah, I feel like I always start with affirmations. So does somebody else want to start today?
I can start.
Yeah, you said you were all ready. I'm curious what you came up with.
It's something that I think is attributed to quite a few people, but one of my favorite singers, Karen Berquist from Over the Rhine, apparently has this motto of comparison is the thief of joy. And I think she got it from Theodore Roosevelt, but who knows? Everybody gets something from everywhere. But I have used this throughout since I've heard this, as I measure myself up, or if I start to measure myself up against another person. And I try just to remember this: comparison is the thief of joy. So I can compare myself to Mozart as a piano player, and I will forget all of the fun, all of the contentment and the joy I felt playing the piano. Or if as an equestrian, I can compare myself to the greats and say, oh, I can pick out all of the pieces that I need to work on and how I failed at this and I didn't do this. Or I can relish the moment that I have sitting on the back of a horse and participating in this activity. There's always going to be room for growth. I can identify with that, but I'll never experience the pleasure and the joy and and take in and fill my cup if I'm constantly measuring against someone else. Now follow up with follow that one.
Now who's gonna follow that one? Samuel.
I'll go. Mom's delaying her time.
I'm going, I got nothing.
No, I'm really grateful for, I'm going to go gratitude route. I'm pretty grateful for the relationships I have during COVID-19. Like, it's crazy who I've found for supports, who I've kind of reached out to. So I'm really grateful for my network that was different than I thought it was, but it's still a great network. And so, I'm feeling really content with my social life, which is something that hasn't really been the case for 6 months. So I guess I'm also affirming myself that I'm glad I recognized that my social life wasn't really living up to par. And so taking actions to change that was a good assessment of my own mental health. So boom, double follow up that one.
I'm going to give you a COVID high five, which is an air high five.
Nice.
Gratitude or affirmation? Or both?
It's like a better version of truth or dare.
It is actually, isn't it? Yeah, because it's a win-win. Both of them are good. Which do you want to go with? I think I'm really grateful for noticing just where day by day things can change on how we're feeling. And sometimes we can feel really stressed and overwhelmed, and then we can take steps to turn that around and feel better. And I think just noticing just like the weather changing, our energy level shifts and ebbs and flows, our perspective ebbs and flows. It's kind of nice to know that we don't have to feel stuck. So I think I'm just noticing the difference of that ebb and flow and change. And that's a good feeling of like, if we can stick with it and keep putting forth effort and good things to make good investments in our time and energy, that it's invested well. Maybe that's my affirmation then that comes out of that. Invest well. Let's invest well.
I do think that's a really interesting concept of the whole, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay, I got it.
Sweet. Okay, everyone. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week. I'm so glad to be back in the swing of things. Hopefully we'll be recording together next time. But you know what? Who knows? I'm fingers crossed. We're still gonna have to do off the beaten path remote. So don't worry, Zoom. We'll still be paying your premium fees. But sweet. Thanks everyone for joining us. It was so great to see everyone again. We'll see you in 2 weeks with an off the beaten path. So awesome. See you then.